Um,
There we go. We made it. It only took almost 30 minutes later, but we did it.
almost 30 minutes.
Okay.
And I was in Google Hangouts the entire time. And then I'm switching back to my email just to see if anything's in my email. And no, whatever. Anyway, I can't stand technology. I really can't.
Point is that we made it.
Sorry, everybody.
We're here
I
now
have
and things are
I have a
working.
shitty computer. Well, obviously I can't host lives with other people.
Just maybe not on your laptop.
It's the only thing I have for that. So, oh well.
Oh,
Hi, everybody.
hi guys.
Okay, so um, first off, I want to say thank you because I had wanted to do a live with you anyway, but as soon as I started formulating this idea of talking about grief and the spiritual path and my personal experiences or whatever, I instantly thought of you for obvious reasons.
Well, I'm honored
Um,
you thought of me.
but I mean, I know Brittany and everybody has similar experience in some shade. But I don't know. Healing from grief is a long process. So, like, I'm 7 years out from the biggest grief from my mother's death. 7 years? Yeah, 7 years out. So, I thought it would also be kind of interesting to see the sort of the difference, the contrast between our experiences as you're newly entering.
Yeah. For me, it hasn't even been a year yet.
Right. So the first thing I want to do though is just grief in general. Like grief is the deep sadness caused especially by someone's death. And then of course there, depending on where you look, there's like 5 or 7 stages of grief. And I went with the 5 because I think the 7 they're kind of, it's kind of redundant. A couple of them I think aren't necessary. They go without saying in the 5. So, and it doesn't matter what order, but denial or shock, anger, then bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And so, I don't know. For me, I don't know how many experiences you have with death. I have quite a few, actually. And for me, each and every one of those is different.
Yeah.
My response to them, my experience of them is different.
Not including pets, I have lost 4 people that I was particularly close to throughout my life. So
And is your experience of that loss the same, or do you find that it's different in each,
it's very
the way
different.
that it hits you, the way you handle it, the way you move through it?
Yeah, it's very different. And how I grieve each person is very different. Um,
Mm.
how I processed it is very different. It's strange.
So, um, for me, there have been like I lost my grandfather at a young age, who was my favorite relative, and then I lost my brother when I was 19. Um, but for me, those I'm setting those aside for this discussion. Just for one, like with my grandfather, I was 11 or 10, and of course, grief is like very different when you're a child than when you're an adult. And I wasn't actively on my spiritual path, and my mother was the first real death in my adult life that had any like deep effect on me. And for me, and I think you're the opposite. That's another reason why I want to discuss this with you. But for me, I completely shut down. Like when she died, I was still working in that witchy metaphysical shop, Compass Rose, and so we'd have lectures and classes and blah blah blah, and all these people are coming in that are, my people, and they are commenting that I'm checked out. Like they know I'm not there. Like I'm just standing there holding space. And I mean, I didn't journey for a couple years. I did not do magic for many years. Like I just completely shut down upon her death.
It's like the loss completely severed your spiritual self.
Kind of. I was very close to my mom, but it was also like that's why I brought up the stages of grief, because I definitely went through these stages in my own way, except for bargaining. I never had that one. I don't understand how that comes into grief. I can see if, I mean, and maybe in your case, because like you had time, so maybe there was some sense of bargaining, but asking for this not to be, or for her to get well or whatever. But like my mom, she was diagnosed, and literally 3 days later she was dead. So like I didn't have that stage at all. It was just here today, gone tomorrow, and here to deal with it.
Yeah, I think bargaining comes more when it's gradual versus
Right.
a sudden thing, because you don't have time
Right.
to have those thoughts if it's sudden. If it's gradual, then you're kind of you more dwell on, I wish this wasn't happening. I wish that I could change something. And if it's sudden, then you think, I wish I could have changed something. So maybe
Right.
it's there a little bit, but not nearly as much when it's versus, sudden.
So what kind of effect do you think your grief is having on your path right now, if you don't mind talking about it?
Um, it's strange because it's basically my mother's passing has heightened a lot of what I have always known about myself. And it's caused me to further find more about my own personal gifts that I have been denying my whole life. And since her passing, I've had so many synchronicities, which I actually didn't even know the term synchronicities until it started to be discussed here in the YouTube community. And I was like, there is a term for that? That's crazy. I thought this was just weird coincidences, and it's actually a
Right.
thing. So, not only that, but looking back and realizing that I had experiences seeing spirits as a kid, and I've had several experiences throughout my teen and adult life too, that I just, or my dreams that I have and things like that. My mother's death basically shoved me into this perpetual motion to try and figure that out about myself. Not even necessarily to hear from her, but to understand a part of me that I think I just denied. And I know that she would have wanted me to understand it. So I also think that's why the events of her death went the way that they did. For me to get into this space to try and figure this out. So it's strange because I am still in the processing stage, I'm still in the pain stage, but I'm also in this, I have to understand so much about me and where I am spiritually as well, alongside my pain and my grief. So that's where I'm at.
That makes sense. And as you're talking, it sounds terrible to say, but I can say it very comfortably and confidently about my mother's death. But like it was freeing in a way, like liberating in a way. Um, I, for instance, I did not step fully into Drew. Like I did in half of my life, like my spirit life with my spiritual friends and whatever. I was Drew. But of course, my mother gave me my birth name. And so, out of, love and respect and, whatever, I was still that. But now, like, since her death 7 years ago, like, that's who I am. Like, legally, if it's with my kids' school or what have you, then I use my legal name. But otherwise, when I introduce myself to strangers, I introduce myself as Drew. I am fully Drew. Whereas before, it was just sort of my magical name, my working name, what have you. But I was able to step more fully into myself in a way. upon her death in many ways, actually. And when I say that that I completely shut down, it's a little misleading. Like I didn't actively do anything for a couple years at all, but I've never been disconnected from on a spiritual level. Like I've always been connected. I don't know how else to put that, but I was still talking like with my dear soul sister who named me she who walks between the worlds about all manner of stuff whatever on a spiritual level because that's pretty much for me everything is spiritual. Like I told my boss lady at Compass, going pee is spiritual. Now that's an exaggeration, but I mean like spirit moves through everything. Everything spirit is touching everything, so everything is spiritual. But I did a video when I did the YouTube Pagan Challenge, and it was traveling through the chakras. And my mom's death knocked me right into my root chakra, and I stayed there for a long time. But so I had been in my crown right before that, so I was like in the height of my spirituality, and so that's why for me, when she died, it felt like I was just like I just shut down completely because I had been up here, doing all these. I mean, I can't even teaching classes about crystals and about magic and spellcraft and going to gem and mineral shows and working with crystals and um, doing tarot readings and energetic readings and balancing, just doing all this stuff all the time to like nothing and to just to buying my home and to painting and very earthly things. Um, but I didn't want to do meditation. I didn't want to do shamanic journey for like a couple years. I didn't want to do magic. I didn't want to do anything. Probably because I was just so hurt. Um, and I was really pissed off. I was pissed off until last year. I was so mad at her until last year. Um, and that's another part of grief. Like I didn't allow myself, there were a lot of things that she did in my life that were messed up, but I didn't allow myself to be mad at her while she was alive. So all of that came out after she was dead. All the things that, anytime she ever did something really not cool and I had just let it go because I loved her and I didn't want to be a bitch or whatever, came for me, years after her death.
That's strange because I have the same kind of complicated thing with my mother too, where there's things that occurred that during her life that were complicated because when your parent does something that is not okay, it's really easy to overlook it,
Right.
and then you don't feel the things that you're supposed to feel. And grief and anger are complicated because they just clash with each other. You think, I shouldn't feel angry. This feels strange. And then you feel guilt, and it's strange. But the other thing I was going to bring up, because I kind of recognize, is it seems like you had. I know that you're not so much a tarot person, but I keep looking at your describing your experiences with the loss of your mom, and I see very much a Ten of Swords moment where you went down to you fell and went to this place at the very bottom of your functionality spiritually and had to climb back up. And that's interesting.
Definitely. Definitely. Um, and it again, it took a couple years to kickstart that. But I eventually I did because this is who I am. Sometimes you need to retreat into yourself and just sort of heal or do whatever you need to do. Getting back to the anger thing though, just for anybody who, because you talking about the guilt or whatever, like I had to give myself permission because I was the same way at first. Like, no, no, and you don't speak ill of the dead. Don't think, whatever. But like, no, what you did was messed up, and I'm allowed to be angry about that. And actually, that was very beneficial and very healing because once I was like, oh no, it's okay for me to be mad about that. Um, Even just kind of talking to her, like that was fucked up what you did. Um, it was very cathartic, and I was able to move through that anger. And like now, I'm completely at peace with her death. But it took like it'll be her 8-year anniversary this summer, and it took me until I think it was just before the summer. So yeah, just before the 7th anniversary of her death, I finally, a little bit before that, I came to peace with the whole thing. Because in the beginning, I was suppressing a lot, like trying to keep it down, trying to keep it away. Not my pain at her loss, but just all the other BS. Because again, any relationship with a parent is complicated.
And I think we suppress stuff when we go through grief because we're so devastated. We go into survival mode. We don't think about all of the other complicated emotions that come from losing someone. And the thing is that grief causes losing someone causes all these voids in your life that now won't be filled, and that does cause the deep pain, but it also causes all of the other little complicated emotions that come with it. There's something I'll remember that I'm angry with her about, or there's things that I'll remember that I feel happy about, or things that I remember that I just feel sad about. Like that's
Yeah.
how it is.
And for me, when I was stuck in that anger, I couldn't even think about the happy things because it'd be like, no, she's a bitch. Like, and I couldn't even. But see, now I can think about it all, and it's all okay. Like, and I always knew she was imperfect. She was a human being. She was doing the best that she could. But until I faced my own garbage, from the whole situation, I couldn't really be at peace with it all. Real quick, Brittany asked, yeah, what my soul sister died from. I can't be 100% sure. My mother died of stage 4 stomach cancer. And 2, maybe 3 years later, my soul sister, who was like my best friend, we would get on the phone and talk for hours and hours and hours about just anything and everything. And again, there was always, like, we were right there. There was always a spiritual element. Like, there's nobody else in the world I've ever known that I could just talk to like that. This woman was in her 70s. I was in my early 30s, well, mid 30s at that time. But she was like one of the dearest people I've ever known. I'm pretty sure she died of cancer, but she was afraid and she wouldn't go to the doctor. So we're pretty sure it was cancer, but we don't really know for sure. But that wasn't a sudden, like, we saw that coming and we all like eked out every moment with her. But it was very devastating. I remember getting into my bathtub and everybody was gone. My kids were at school, my husband was at work, and just the noises that came out of me because of the pain I was feeling from her loss and also the loss of my mother years before. It was horrifying. The noises that escaped my body from the pain that I was feeling at her loss.
The strange part about those moments is that they, I think, define you when you're brought down to that sheer raw, just human emotion wrapped up in pain and despair. Like, we don't experience those rock bottom moments very often, and when we do, I think they imprint on us. So that's something that I think will stick with you forever.
Absolutely. And Lily Pad's talking about grudges and having trouble putting her dad on her altar. Yeah, I made, if you guys have seen it, my shadow boxes. I made a shadow box for my mom immediately after her death, and I had it up for like a few months before I was just like, ugh, and I couldn't. I put it away, and I didn't bring it out again until early last year when I finally was like, okay, I'm not pissed off at you anymore, and I redid it and made it much prettier and much nicer, and now it hangs above my altar. But I understand what you're saying, Lily Pad. Like, when there's that hurt or anger, it's not even about them anymore. Like, it's purely about us. We're the ones that are left behind. And until I dealt with the bullshit and just allowed myself to be pissed off, knew it was okay to be pissed off, but came to a place where this she was only human wasn't just an excuse. It was actually understanding what she did was wrong, but she really was doing the best that she could, and like feeling that settle in me in a way that it hadn't before. Then finally I could move on. every relationship is different. It's hard. It's like I remember when my brother died. A girl I was friends with was like, I don't know what I would do, and she's just like freaking out, and I'm like, because she just adored her brother, and I'm just like, I hated my brother. Like, not that I wanted him dead, but I'm like, you don't understand my feelings at all. Like we don't, just because we both had a brother doesn't mean that, I mean, the dynamics of the relationship are totally different. That's why I don't ever, like, I've talked to you before about, your grief, and I told you that I've been there for you, but I know that I was careful not to be like, I know what you're going through, because I don't. Like, your relationship with your mother was your relationship with your mother, and probably very different than mine with mine.
I
um
I'm really careful to when I word stuff like that too. So how you're doing it. Brittany just said something interesting that I actually saw a TED Talks on that blew my mind. She just said, I remember the last moments with my mother in Port Townsend. She wasn't all there and she was mentioning things that weren't real, at least in this realm. So there's a TED Talks called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically talking about how it's a really common thing for people who are close to death that they see their previous relatives and things like that, or their past relatives. It's I guess this is a very very common thing. So I'm almost wondering if that was what Brittany's mother was experiencing as well. Sorry, it just like sparked me, and I was
no, no.
oh
Well, I definitely believe that that kind of thing is legitimate. um for whatever reason. I mean, to me, like, there could be science behind it, but I don't care. Like, it may be things misfiring in your brain, or I don't really care. Like, it's a real experience for you. That's all that matters. Like, but I absolutely believe that kind of thing happens. I don't know if that happened with my mom because she wasn't talking the day she died at all, but there's all kind of shit that happened with my mom the day of and after her death, but that's my next witchy tale for February, so I'm not going to get into any of that. But
forward to seeing that though, because that's exactly what happened with me too. My mom didn't speak by the time I got there, but there's a lot of stuff that happened the day of and the day after too. So
yeah, uh, it's interesting.
yeah,
um, and honestly, it wasn't until Jana's death that I realized, this is, I'm jumping around, but it wasn't until Jana's death that I realized that grief hits me in different ways, and that it does different things to me. Um, and that only makes sense depending on the kind of relationship you had with the person, the place you are in your life at that time. But I think in a weird way I gain things, and I guess that's because, if you're hurt or if you go through something, hopefully you're going to get something out of that. You're going to become bigger or better than you were before in some way. Um, so I think I just learned a lot, and that's what got me thinking about grief, is her death, because her death actually taught me quite a bit about myself when it comes to my grieving process and what happens, and had me looking back at different deaths and how they affected me and what happened to me. And that's kind of how this whole thing popped out of my brain in the first place.
I feel like we don't learn without pain. And I think that's something that a lot of people ignore too. But yeah, I can see where that would spiral you into this thought process.
It just seems to me that everybody's going to have a bit of a different story, um, with grief. Um, but I think when you are so spiritually minded, that it would be interesting to explore uh, what that looks like, how that shapes your path. And I sometimes I would sit and wonder, like, what would I be doing had I just continued on the way I was? But clearly that it wasn't supposed to be that way, and everything happens for a reason, whether I understand it in this moment or not. But there's a different kind of grief, of course, loss of any kind. And I am sitting where I am right now in part because of the loss of my mother, the loss of my dear soul sister, but also the loss of a friend who's still living. And there was a weird falling out, and the way that we fell out slammed me right back deep into my witchiness, where I'm like, I'm doing witch shit every day, all day, and I hadn't in a long time, because it wasn't accepted by this person, basically. That's a bit of a generalization, but I felt as if who I truly am, um, being a witch on a shamanic path, was not accepted by that person, and it was hurtful because I didn't realize it, being friends with them for years and years, and they're not Christian or anything. But I, without my mother's death, without Anna's death, without the death of this friendship, I wouldn't be on YouTube. I wouldn't have met any of you guys. I wouldn't be having any of these experiences. Now, I know that's not necessarily true for all of you. You were obviously on YouTube before. Um, but again, just analyzing how grief has shaped me and what it's done for me, and like the richness of my life in this moment, um, is in part due to these losses, which is fucked up.
Well, I think that our spiritual progress is deeply connected to our pain. I mean, it has to be, because again, we don't
I
grow
agree.
without pain. So it has to
I
be.
agree. Yeah, yeah, I agree. There are definitely things I can look at that have happened to me in my life that were not good, that I can directly correlate to things that are um, very integral to my spiritual path. So I agree with that.
I keep peeking at the chat too.
Check in the feed. Yeah, I always thought that that the dynamic with you and your mom and Brittany and her mom, but then even I sometimes when Brittany's talking about her mom and her relationship with her mom, I'm like, so I always saw this weird sort of correlation between, obviously you guys is uncanny because being in the same place and all of that.
Well,
Um,
here's the even more wild thing about Brittany is that I remember when her mom died. I actually
mm,
don't think I ever remember her being in Port Townsend, though, because I think it's a detail that Brittany never shared with me. So when I was in Port Townsend before my mom passed, I remembered that Brittany's mom had passed away from ovarian cancer. And I was like, I should talk to her. She would probably help me kind of understand this and how to deal with this. And then she left a comment on on a photo I had posted saying, I'm in Port Townsend. I'm here because of this reason and blah blah blah. And she was like, that's really wild. My mom passed away there. And I was like, what the, I didn't know that. That's nuts. So, and they I think they went in the same hospital is what we determined. Just crazy.
and that to me is a synchronicity, but
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like that, and there's so many things like that that happened around my mom's death that I was like, I can't ignore this stuff. This is so profound and crazy.
yeah, I hope this topic isn't too, um, I don't know. I'm not, we're not crying, we're not bawling, but it is a very serious topic. But I
It's
just feel
thick.
like it's an important thing to talk about because it's something that touches every single person on the planet. If you care about anybody,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to experience grief in one
By the
form or
time
another.
you're in your mid 20s to 30s, you've probably lost someone or experienced grief
Right.
at some level.
And like I said, it doesn't even necessarily have to be death. You I have grieved the loss of many friendships, like whether they moved, I mean, for various reasons, that the person is no longer a part of my life, in the way they
Absolutely,
were.
too. And it kind of feels the same as the as a loss caused from death. It's basically just they're not here anymore, and I feel
Right.
sad because of that, and I feel hurt because of that, and I go through the stages of denial of, well, maybe they still want to be my friend, or if I had done something different, maybe it would have been this way, or I'm angry because they just disappeared from my life, or and then you finally move into the point where you're like, this is what it is, and
Right.
I
Yeah, acceptance.
burn my energy elsewhere.
And that's it's kind of double double edged twofold there, because I can sometimes feel that way about people who have passed, like they just moved away. Now I know they, but the feeling can be the same. Like, oh, they're just not here. Yeah, like, I don't know, because that's the way I am with my soul sister now. I mean, immediately afterward, I was devastated, but it's been a few years out, and now I'm okay. Oh, she's just not here with me. But
Those feelings are basically two sides to one coin.
right,
I really like this last comment here about
mm,
uh, discuss like the avoidance of discussing the conversation of death. It,
yeah.
it's and or even that we can't express our grief. That's frustrating because you hear so many.
Or they're supposed to be a certain way.
Yeah,
Like, that really bugs me. It's off topic, but I watch a lot of like real crime stuff, and when they start talking about the way someone's grieving, I'm like, really? Like, don't tell somebody how like, I understand that there are certain like signs that you might be looking at weird, but you never know how you're going to react in those kinds of situations until you're in them. I remember my mother died in our home, and I remember seeing that and observing that almost objectively. I mean, I was crying as she died, but watching, I mean, it doesn't take, the body starts to go cold very quickly. And her eyes were very deep brown. And I mean, as soon as she took her last breath, you you could watch the color leaving her eye. It was just a very surreal, fascinating experience. And my mother wasn't there anymore. So I rubbed her arm a little bit for a minute, and then I didn't go near her again. I didn't go near her body again because that's not her. It was just a flesh bag laying there. Um, and I could tell when the hospice lady came that she thought our reaction, she thought we were weird because I wasn't crying. I was standing on the stairs, just looking down on everything that was like observing everything. Um, because I guess I was probably in shock. You know what I mean? Like, just
yeah.
yeah. So like I knew her, she thought my reaction and my dad's reaction was not appropriate. I could just tell by that she was looking at us like what the hell, like, yeah, like we were weird. But again, how is anyone to tell somebody else how they should react in any given situation, especially one that traumatic or upsetting or life changing and devastating?
Well, you think being a hospice nurse, she would see the many different reactions that people have, and a lot of the times you react differently than you thought you would too. But
Right.
in the case of my mother, I mean, I was alone with her. I was, it's so strange how it happened. My brother had left to go get my cousin off the ferry, and I had come in the 10 minutes that he left, and in those 10 minutes that I had arrived, my mother had passed. So it was strange because I was alone and the nurses were with me, but I didn't know them, like it was weird. But
Right.
they basically were like, she was waiting for you. We've seen this a lot. She was absolutely waiting for you. And I just was like, it just happened to be that when I walked in that this happened, but it was the same situation where I was looking at her eyes and it was like the light disappeared from them. It was so bizarre. And I experienced this once before when I held my cat in my arms and she had passed. I felt her leave.
Yeah.
That's the
Right.
most bizarre feeling ever. And I remember feeling the same that you did, where once my mother left, I held her hand and had that rock bottom moment, as you described, where I screamed, I bawled, I was hysterical, and the nurses left me for a moment. And then I just was like, I don't want to be here because this she is not here anymore, and I can't be here anymore. And I left, and I actually had no intention on seeing her and ever again, except for when we went to the funeral home to do all that stuff. They had her there and had said that we could give our final goodbyes, and I was very adamant not to do it until both my older siblings were like, we're going to go, you shouldn't miss this opportunity to say your final goodbye. And so they basically like convinced me to go in, and to which they didn't cry, which was strange. Neither one of them did, but I'm like once again bawling. And it's bizarre though. It's bizarre to see that light leave.
It
It's
is,
something
yeah,
that I can't ever unsee either. It's
right.
the weirdest thing.
It's burned in your memory banks. Yeah. Um, see, and maybe it's because of my path, but like my mother, like, there are stages of death, and they told us what these would be. And so, like, one of the last stages is agitation, and they move around a lot, and then they become sort of limp, and they're in the throes of death, basically. And so when she went limp, I just held her in my arms, and I sang, and like when I knew she was going, like she was having trouble breathing, and her like fingernails were turning blue, because she wasn't getting enough oxygen. I started to sing. I wanted to sing her across, and I had already called in like her dad and my brother, and um, so I'm singing to her and I'm bawling, and she had that moment of clarity where she looked at me right in my face, and I could tell she was saying I'm sorry. And then uh, yeah, she just took one more short, sharp breath, and then she was gone. But as painful and hard as that was, there was also something very beautiful about it. Like, my mother shared my first breath with me, and I shared her last breath with her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, as a child, that's one of the best things we can do for our parent, and that's really profound, Drew. That like hits me right here. Because I think about that too. I mean, as I told you that my birthday a couple of days ago was hard because I this is the first time I won't ever hear her say happy birthday to me, but she told me that I completed our family because I was the last child. And it's strange, you're a mother too. So, remembering your children being born and hoping that when you go, they'll be there with you to share your last breath as you gave them theirs. Like, that's insanely profound.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the entire world ever.
No, no. And the thing is that I'm sure you share the same thought process where you were meant to experience it the way that you did. That's the same for me. I know I was meant to experience that the way that everything fell into place the way that it was because I was meant to see everything the way that I was supposed to see it. And
Yeah.
um, it's funny because Brittany is actually asking me. Uh, my spirituality has always been with me, but the last year, my deep dive back into it. Um, yeah, like my mom's death propelled me into my practice because it was the only way I felt I was ever going to find peace with this. And it's still a process. I'm definitely not at peace, but that's the process in this. I have the understanding of that. And my mom was really supportive of my beliefs. She was very curious about it. And I think that by going into my practice, I am honoring that. I'm honoring the things that she did, always giving me her love and support with my beliefs too. So that's another reason to answer Brittany's question.
Yeah, I was lucky in that too. My mom was very supportive. Like, when I thought I was going off my nut and needed to be checked into a loony bin, she was like, calm down. Let's find out what's happening.
So
And she
cool.
totally had my back, and we figured it out, and I was fine. But yeah, mothers are they're an interesting thing.
Yeah. We are both mothers. We're like, God, are we gonna have complicated relationships with our kids? I mean, I think it's a little bit more fair for me to think that because mine are so young. But
Yeah. I don't know. We were just talking about this. I mean, this is off the topic of grief, but um, recently with my my two younger kids, like I have such a messed up relationship with my dad, and my mom and my relationship was like my best friend and my worst enemy sometimes at the same time, you know. So it was very complicated,
that is a
and
group in my life too with my parents.
and so I'm like, you know, I don't ever want it to be this way with us. I just let y'all, I let my kids be them, and I'll just get in where I can rather than, you know, making it more difficult than it needs to be. Because they're not like my youngest is 16. They're not little kids anymore. Like so wherever I can fit in, that's where we'll meet. And
That makes sense to be in that phase. Like that makes perfect sense for how old they are. Whereas mine are like, so little and need me all the
yeah,
time.
they love you. They love everything about you. You're fine.
They play with me all day. Except for my son told me I smelled and needed to take a shower this morning. I was like, thanks, dear.
Oh no.
I keep peeking at the chat.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. To Brittany, to your comment, yeah, you turn around and I look at my son's feet, my youngest's feet, and I'm just like, what happened? You used to have the cutest feet. Now you have these big hobbit man feet. What happened? It's different with boys too, because my oldest is a girl, and you know she still has cute little petite feet and hands, and I can still see my little girl in there. But I mean, my boys are beautiful, but I'm just like, what happened?
That's probably going to happen with my sons too. I was noticing though that there's a lot of our fellow witches here in the chat that are in the profession of death. Did you notice that?
I see, and um, okay, so I always come at this from like a shamanic standpoint, just because that's, but like any other people I know who resonate and identify as being on a shamanic path, I call us death walkers, and it kind of sucks, but we help people die, um, or not just people, like animals, whatever, like help them cross, help them make that journey, and it's actually part of, you know, being shaman. But see, I don't know. Witchcraft is to me what I mean when I say shaman or shamanic. Witchcraft is so tightly linked with that. You know, the wise woman and the cunning man and these the healers and the counselors and the spiritual leaders of their community. You know, at least where witchcraft started. Um, so I don't know. To me, they're very symbiotic, at least shamanic and witchy paths. So it doesn't surprise me at all that witches are associated with either healing or dying or both. Like working in, you know, hospice or in a hospital as a nurse, or um, like Raquel's job, or that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah,
But
because I mean,
even
Trish,
it's not necessarily a death or life path, or healing path per se, but even Brittany's job has been, teaching. Like, I think all of these things, even though it has nothing to do with the craft, I just think we are what we are. So of course it manifests in whatever we do outside of our practice as well,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. That makes perfect sense to me. Speaking at the chat.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a lot of, I mean, just basically calling attention to like everybody that I know that is here tonight that I'm aware of like what they do for a living. There's a good chunk
Yeah.
of you guys
Yeah.
that,
I hadn't really thought of it about it, consciously thought about it either. But yeah, you're right.
yeah, it's strange.
Jim's telling ghost stories now, I think.
That's okay. I'm all for ghost stories. I just bought a big book on ghosts today. So,
Well, and again, to Donna's point, she talks about being able to heal headaches as a preteen. I mean, what do witches do but shift energy and work with energy? So things like that's why forever ago I did a video about Reiki, and I'm on a Facebook group. A witch had asked about if anybody incorporated Reiki into their practice, and I'm like, I didn't answer, but I'm like, I, Reiki literally translates to spiritual energy. So you're just moving energy. Like that is what witches do. I don't care what you call it. So I think that witches, especially if they are practiced in moving energy, will be will come into things like Reiki or moving energy or reading energy, that kind of thing, um, maybe more easily than people who aren't on a witchy path and don't manipulate energy. And so it's not surprising that you would be sort of naturally inclined to healing headaches or, shifting the energy and relieving someone's pain.
yeah, basically, right. Reiki is another avenue to this to a same destination when it comes to what witchcraft is how I look at it, at least. So,
Yeah. Wait, what happened? Wait, what? Sorry, caught in the chat.
yeah, that's what I'm peeking at.
Yeah, that's like sometimes I think because of how my path is, I should, think about working hospice or something, but I honestly cringe at it. Um, in the beginning, I wanted so badly to be a healer. And of course, helping someone die is healing. It is a beautiful healing in a way. But I'm an empath too. That shit weighs heavily on me. Again, when I do my witchy tale for next month, y'all will hear exactly what I went through after my mom's death, like physically as well as emotionally. Like I'm not good at separating myself. And of course, I could do things. I could do shields and crystals, and I could do things to prevent that sort of thing. But I also, in part, don't want to because I'll be muting or cutting off part of myself if I
That's
do that.
exactly how I felt about it too. That's interesting. Because all my life I've wanted to do a profession like a veterinarian or a physician in the sense of healing or helping someone, but I am too sensitive. I can't handle it. I think it would emotionally destroy me. And then I also thought about that, how I could do certain things to prevent it, but I feel like I'd be stifling this part of myself that I just there's no putting a cap on that geyser. Like it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I even had the conversation years and years and years ago that if my empathy, and I don't mean being able to empathize, but I mean literally like feeling others' pain, whether it be emotional or physical. If that was not of benefit in some way, I didn't want it. But it didn't take me long to realize that again, I'm cutting off a limb, basically. Like that is a natural innate part of me. So if I shut it off, I'm not full, I don't know. It just felt wrong. I wasn't okay with it. I was like, never mind. I'm fine. Like,
It's hard being an empath, and it actually took me a long time to understand and accept that about myself too. But I always carried that feeling of basically um trying to kind of put a blockage up was suffocating a part of myself that is a large part of myself. So
yeah.
I get that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are probably sensitive, more sensitive than they realize, and possibly empathic. A lot more people than realize. I remember being in high school and I would go into like a shopping mall and I would just be like Brittany's describing her, like my emotions are shifting so quickly. And I didn't know why. I just thought that I got bitchy when I was around a lot of people, like, or went to festivals, or whatever it was. Like, it wasn't until I was an adult I really started. I didn't even like when I was with my daughter's father. I would just be pissed off, like grouchy for no fuck. And I'd ask myself, why am I so mad? Like, I have nothing to be mad about, but like, my ex is an angry person. And like, I was picking up on his. It wasn't until after we split up that I realized, oh, I pick up other people's garbage. I see. Like, I can pick up other people's emotions. Unfortunately, working at Compass, I was able to like experiment with that and like get validation that, yeah, you're right, like you're picking up what I'm laying down. um but I've even felt physical pain, which that sucks. I don't like that. Like, I was with friends and we were traveling and she had told us like the day before, I don't even know, it's some medical condition with her knee and it causes extreme pain. And I'm sitting beside her in the passenger seat in the car and she's driving, and all of a sudden up under my kneecap, there's just this sharp, piercing pain. And I'm like, wait. Is that what you like? I described to her exactly what I felt. And she was like, yeah, that's what I feel all the time. And I was like, oh my God.
That sounds
Like, I don't
terrible.
want to feel other people's pain. I'm not into it.
Like, I
It's
love you.
not okay.
Could you
That doesn't happen very often, thankfully, but it makes me think of, I've seen psychics who they'll be like, oh, they'll feel sharp pain in their head and they'll know that the person who passed died from a head injury, stuff like that. I'm not a medium, so I've never tried to use it in that capacity, but it to me it seems similar. Like the spirits are using the empathic gift that the person has to communicate with them.
that makes sense.
We totally got off topic here.
Yeah, I was about to try and steer it back, but trying to make myself more comfortable. Okay. It's funny because the chat is still on topic. God, we have some amazing freaking people here. Look at this. Like, are you reading some of the things that these people do? You guys are all so freaking awesome. Seriously.
Yeah, better than me because
Duh.
I genuinely just the other day, and like from where I sit on my couch, I can see out to well across the street. This little old man would sit on his porch every day in his rocking chair, and people walk through the neighborhood with their dogs, whatever. They'd wave and maybe stop and talk to him. And one day, all of a sudden, just the other day, I see all these ambulances and stuff, an ambulance, fire trucks, all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh God. And then the sheriffs come, and I'm like, oh God. And they turn off all their lights, and then later a hearse comes, and like it just that's a man who lives in my neighborhood who I've never met or spoken to. And I just like I sent angels and all the whole nine, but like I'm upset that you died, and like I can't work in a place where people are dying on a regular basis. Like that would just eat away at me terribly.
That sounds really devastating. I'm sorry.
Well,
Wow.
I'm again, I don't know you. I don't know anything about you, but still like I literally almost cried because this man died that lives 2 roads over from me. So I can't even imagine going to work on a regular basis and having to be around situations like where people are dying on a regular basis. Like my hat goes off to you because I feel like you are a stronger person. Um, like I wish I could be strong enough to be there for people who needed me. Like I wish I could do that.
That's
And maybe if I pushed myself I could, but I don't want to. I don't want to find that strength. Like I don't want to do it. I think it's very selfish actually, but
yeah, I worry about that too because like I want to, but at the same time I'm like I don't know if I have the ability to do it is really my thing. But yeah, you guys are freaking amazing.
I'm laughing at Karen.
uh
Yeah. I don't think I could do that in there. Yeah. Um, yeah, definitely not my path. Even if it would, I think it is a like an option, but I'm not getting on that ramp. I'm not doing that.
Isn't it weird how we're aware that there are several crossroads in our life and we have to kind of choose accordingly to what we can really handle at our core? It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's probably an opportunity to, for growth or whatever. And I'm just not interested. Not this time around. And I honestly, anytime I see a hospice or anything like that, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, you never know. Like I could be, you know, 10 years from now, maybe I could be doing that. Who knows? But right now, no, not happening.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of just like, you seem so aware right now where you are. That's not an option. But who knows
Yeah.
where we'll be? I mean, there are many things that have happened in my life where I'm like, didn't expect that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're just gonna deal with that and keep going. And it's not even necessarily bad things. It's just like, wow, okay, I would have never seen that coming, but okay, here
Yeah.
we go. Guess we're gonna plunge into this.
Well, back to grief. Um, I personally think, I mean, I don't see you on a daily basis, obviously, but I personally feel like my interactions with you around it, um, that you're handling it beautifully, really, and with a lot of grace and honesty. So while it's going to take you however long it takes you to work through it, I genuinely feel like you're okay. You're good. Like you got this. It's just a matter of however long it takes um, for you to go through your grief journey, really. And I kind of think we walk that path forever. If you love somebody and they're taken from you, it changes and evolves over time, I think.
The crazy thing is, ever since my mom passed, so many people have told me that I'm handling it tremendously well. And each time I hear it, it feels strange because on the inside, it's all chaos. And it's just like, I was talking about this with my therapist actually. And she said that she asked me if I believed in past lives, which was kind of cool to hear from a therapist. I was like, yep, yeah, I do. And she goes, in my line of work, I've learned that some people have a resilient spirit, and it's just something that transcends and keeps going throughout each life. And she said, like, I think that you are one of those people. And it's weird when you experience something like that because you're just like, I don't know how to feel about this. Like, it feels good, but at the same time, you're like, what?
Well, and I know at least from my perspective, and I think that other people, it's probably similar, if not the same. What we mean when we say you're handling it well is not like, oh, she's happy, she's doing great. That's not what it is. It's just that, yeah, there's this strength and this honesty. Um, like you're not hiding from it, I guess.
Yeah,
And
and I think
so,
I confuse the two. I think I confuse it in the sense of like, I'm not happy. What are you talking about? But
right, right, right. Right. It's not, oh, she's okay, she's fine. It's just that she is in the appropriate space, headspace, emotional space to be able to move through it. And that probably has a lot to do with your husband and your kids being there to support you and whatever. But it also has to do, of course, with your path and your relationship with your mom and the whole thing. Um, but yeah, it's not like, oh, Diana's fine. No, that's not what it is. It's she will be. You can see that you will be.
yeah, and I know that too, but it's weird. It's weird being in the thick of it, you know? I mean, I know that you remember that so well with your mother. Like, you sit
Yeah.
there, even if you're in a space where you seem like you're in control, you sit there and think like, God, the pain from this is just fucking tremendous.
And sometimes I was on autopilot, completely on autopilot.
Yeah,
Fake it till you make it
yeah.
sometimes.
And
Yeah.
it's
Because
interesting.
my kids were in grade school at the time too. My daughter, I think, was in middle school, but the boys were in grade school. So like, yeah, like you got shit to do. You can't just fall apart.
No, I remember when my grandfather died. It was actually 10 years ago this New Year's Day. And for 2 weeks after his death, I would come home from work and I would sit on the couch and I would cry for hours. And I didn't do that with my mother. And I felt the same. I felt the same, just overwhelming grief. But I didn't have the chance to do it because I I'm a stay-at-home mom. I care for my children all day, and there were times where something would hit me and I would start crying, and my son would ask me what was going on. And for the first like 5 months of my mother's passing, I didn't tell him because I didn't know how. And then I started to hide my emotions from him, which felt icky. And I was like, I can't do this. And then we eventually told him. So now he knows, which is a bizarre thing to tell a 3-year old about death. But I couldn't escape to that again rock bottom place of just despair and pain. I had to just do what I could. And in fact, when my mother was dying and I went to Washington to see her, I had to take my sons with, and my mother in law went with me because my husband couldn't step away from work. So I had to bounce back and forth between being mom and going and being with my mother and being a daughter too, and then supporting being with my family as well. And it's just weird being in that space where you have to fake it till you make it. You have to continue to do this stuff. But then in those quiet moments when you're alone, everything crashes down and you feel that despair. I still do. In fact, I was feeling it earlier today as I was rocking my son to sleep for his nap. I was just in a quiet place, holding him in a dark room, and my mind wandered to replaying the moments of losing my mom. And sure enough, like I started tearing up. So
Yeah, I used to do that a lot too. Yeah.
it's crazy.
Well, for me, we were actually living with my parents at the time, so there was no not telling anyone. Like she was there, and then she wasn't, and she went in the hospital, and we went and saw her in the hospital the week before, and um, yeah, so it was just there. Yeah, it was basically. I honestly don't remember. Like I don't remember my demeanor. You know what I mean? Like I know for the immediate couple days after, I was just like, nah, like I was just in my nightie and I was messed up. But there was a lot going on. Um, but I really don't remember. I thought I was my normal self, but again, I remember people saying she's not okay. Like when they thought I couldn't hear them saying she's not okay. So I must not have been.
Is it strange that you just shifted into this different version of yourself? Like, I find that interesting.
Yeah. There, there, there's a lot that goes with that, though. There's a lot that, like, my mother really did free me in a lot of ways because, like, my concern, like, the reason we were with them is because I didn't want to move out. Like, my parents had an abusive relationship. Not like my dad didn't beat my mom or anything, but it was fucked up. Like, for like a month after she died, I was just like, oh my God, I haven't heard that man yell in a whole month. Like, it just was bad. And so my concern and my husband's concern, we don't want to leave my mom alone in this home with this man. Like, at least we can be here and give, with the kids and give her some happiness and whatever. So, I mean, a lot of things. I was freed from a lot of like guilt and false sense of obligation and just all kinds of stuff when she died, really. Um, so, it does make sense that I kind of, I mean, I'm still who I was, but I just stepped more fully into who I wanted to be and what the life I wanted to live after her death.
Well, it seems like you had some of those familial weights pulling you down. And a lot of the times we have this complication with family where we do go into this obligatory space where we want to try and do the best we can for our family, but it stifles us. And that seems like that was very much going on with you. And you don't even realize it's happening because you do it out of love and you try to be, what you can. And then when something severs that, then you slowly start to form into this different process of, oh wow, there's parts of me that I was suffocating and I didn't even know
Mm.
I was doing it. Kind of
Mm.
interesting. Oh, hello, Prue. Yes,
So Raquel is asking if we've talked about how we've used our spiritual practice to move through grief and what practices helped the most.
that is a fantastic question. Leave it to Raquel. You want to go first?
um, for me, the most healing thing that I did with regards to my mother was I talked about it in that one 2018 video or whatever. It was a shadow work thing. I did Sith, and I sat with her, and so I'm just doing this in Sith. You sit. It's a clearing exercise. You're trying to get the energy back to a 0 point to where there's no ick anywhere, and so you say, um, "I love you." I say, "I apologize. Please forgive me." I also say, "I forgive you." And I'm grateful. And the thought process is you're giving love. You are extending your apology for whatever. Like when the BP spill happened and all the dolphins were dying, and I saw that, it broke my heart. And I did Sith. So I was apologizing to the dolphins that humankind had done this. I was apologizing to the ocean. I was apologizing to myself for having witnessed it. You're just trying to clear out all the gook in the situation, and you're trying to find your gratitude, what you could have learned, whatever, whatever. So as I'm sitting here doing this with her, I've called her in, I feel her energy, I'm sitting with her, and all the things are flashing through my mind. Every stupid thing, some really fucked up, some really minor things that have gone on in our relationship. I'm sitting with that and I'm feeling that, and I'm saying, I forgive you. Let's clear the slate, basically. Um, for me, that's the one thing I've done with my mother and the grieving process that really was the most healing. And that after that, I was fine. that's when I was fine. I was no longer pissed off and we were good.
That sounds insanely cathartic.
Yeah. So what
For
about you?
for me, I'm not I'm not super far yet with it, obviously. So for me, the only thing that I've been able to do so far that has helped me is talk to her. And that's what I did on Samhain. I talked to her and I set up, an altar, and just sat in space and talked to her and talked about how much I missed her. And it's my mom. I called her pretty much every day. And whenever my life felt out of control, she was the first person I talked to. And she was the first person who would sit there and tell me, like, you're okay, think you can do this, everything's okay. And she would just sit and encourage me. And so still having that and being able to talk to her, sorry, I have this one here, is it just it made me feel like I still had that. And I did that on Samhain with my grandfather as well, and I have done that the whole 10 years that he's been gone. Is occasionally I will just talk to him, and that's really kind of all I have done so far to try and deal with my grief in the sense of spiritual.
Well, and again, you are just newly into it, so
Yeah,
we'll have to recheck on that, later and see,
but I
because
think
you
doing,
have very different answers over the years.
yeah, but making making my peace with some of the nasty stuff too, and having that kind of forgiveness and that space. I mean, I can probably do it whatever way works for me, but that sounds
Right.
like something I would consider as well.
So, Brittany, in regards to your question about my dad, so like I don't hate my dad. I don't feel love for him either. Like there's a lot of shit. I mean, y'all know I did all that spell work last year and like we barely talk. He did show up the other day. He stayed for like 10 minutes and left. I see him a couple times a year. I I think the only thing, like when my dad is in my presence, I get really anxious and I shake, my voice shakes. Like I'm just very uncomfortable and I don't feel safe, honestly. And so I honestly, I don't know, but I have always felt like when I was younger, I think I would have gotten upset. I think I'll just feel relieved. And that sounds horrible, but I just think I'll be happy that I don't have to deal with him anymore. And I do not feel like I will have grief. I could be wrong about that, but I think I've already gone through the stages of grief with him, like, anger and just, bargaining, the whole thing. Like, I'll be 41 next month and I've been dealing with him all those years and I don't think I'm going to care much, honestly.
That's so strange. I have the same complicated feelings with my dad. Like we have a really messed up relationship. It's sorry, there's a cat fur on my face. It's I have thought about that as well, especially now losing my mother. I think, how am I going to feel when he passes? And part of me thought that I would cling to fixing my relationship with him in the sense of trying to make it more healthy. But my father's one of the type of people who he won't change. He doesn't see his own faults.
Yeah.
So there's only so much you can do with a person like that. And
Right.
thus then you're forced to grieve. So it's
Yeah.
complicated. It's really complicated and it's unfortunate, and I understand in my own way those weird complicated feelings. And
And actually, I do kind of have an answer for that because almost to the day, a year after my mother died, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, bladder cancer.
wow.
Um, yeah, weird. They operated and he's fine, and he's been fine ever since. He's cancer free or whatever, and he had radiation um, but honestly, I got upset right when he told me. I didn't cry or anything, but later I was upset. But honestly, it was a trigger. Like I was upset because I had just lost my mom the year before to cancer, and it was like you're poking the wound.
Yeah.
But I never like I never talked to him about his chemo or any like I don't care. Like I'm sorry. I just I tried with him until my 30s, and then it's just like, how many times can someone show you who they are? How many times can they hurt you and be ugly to you and do things that are against your best interest? Regardless, you know, and why should I continue this just because you're related to me? Like,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, you're a sperm donor who financially supported me. Like, I don't know. Like,
And
there's
this,
no emotional relationship. There's nothing.
yeah. And this is also another form of grief without death. Because as you were just saying, you can go through the stages of grief with a type of relationship like this as well, which is interesting. And it is interesting that
Yeah.
they tend to feel somewhat similar but very different. It's bizarre.
Mm.
All the more proof that grief is more very complicated.
And it's probably in part feels different because, like, you feel like you should be able to fix it somehow. They're not actually dead. They're just, I don't know why it disappeared, but mom's sperm donor. Yeah, that's how I feel about my dad. I mean, I lived with him. He was there, but he was very ineffectual and or just the up like a dick, just horrible.
This is strange. I think your camera is frozen.
Yeah, I don't know why. Um, sorry guys.
I can still hear you though.
Yeah, I mean it's fine.
Oh,
Look,
you're
there
back
I
to you.
am.
We've had enough technical difficulties tonight, okay? Do you want to see if our lovely witches here have some questions for us, unless you had some more on the topic that you wanted to discuss?
No, I mean that's fine. Anything they want to talk about or whatever. Oh, love you, Trish.
Bye, Trish. I will see you soon.
Ah, you guys suck.
You don't want to come up to Minnesota
It
right
makes me happy and sad at the same time. I'm like, yay. Oh.
now. Minnesota's really cold right now.
Yeah, that's true. I don't, well, I'm very hot natured, so it might be all right.
Like next week is going to be really horribly frigid, negatives, frigid, just awful.
Oh, it's the opposite for me, Brittany. My dad told me to my face that I wasn't wanted. I was an accident. My mom tricked him. So yeah.
My dad said something similar. My mom told me that I was a pill baby, that the birth control,
I was too. Or
but
no,
yeah, my
I
dad
actually wasn't, but
pretty sure she just didn't take her pills, and I was like, really? Like, why would you say that? So that's
well, my dad says she tricked me. She told me she was on the pill, but like my mom was already dead at this point, but I had these conversations with my mom. And not about the whole tricking thing because I don't think he ever said that to her. I don't know, but my mom had medical issues when she took the pill and she had to stop taking the pill. There's no way he didn't know that. She had legit medical issues and she stopped taking the pill. And so I'm like, whatever. Like I don't even want to listen to you. I don't even have to listen to your words.
right.
Like you're so full of shit.
So, do you guys have any questions for us? Jeez, Jim, that's rough.
Wow. Parents are so fucked up sometimes. It's
Why
just
is it like our generation too? Like, what?
I don't think that the generations before legitimately thought of their children as people. Like they were property kind of. Because I've always thought like I'm not gonna say like my children are people. They're gonna grow up and I want a good relationship. Like I'm not gonna just treat them like shit. I'm gonna treat them like a human being, you know?
Yeah,
Whereas to me it seemed like my parents treated me probably the way they were treated. Actually, I know I was treated better than they were treated, but like, children are to be seen, not, that whole thing, like
Yeah.
sort of old school, like you're just kids, what you think doesn't matter, what you feel doesn't, you know what I mean? Of course, now we're raising a bunch of snowflakes, but that's a whole other issue.
Any good spell work to reverse resentment?
Ooh. Uh,
Shadow work.
um, right. I know there are crystals for that. I can't think of what they are right off the top of my head though. Shadow work is definitely a good way to know. But shadow work is, I love and hate shadow work at the same time because it really does hurt. It's hard, and I know it has to be, but
Yeah.
uh,
I think obsidian and hematite aren't those negativity absorbers? I was pretty sure you could.
yeah.
Yep.
But for resentment specifically, you can work with damberite, um, and angel wing blue and hydrite, but that's harder to come by. It's basically angelite, but it's in a different form. It's like blade, like um, damberite is easier to get your hands on, but apparently that's supposed to help with resentment.
Or should I
Um,
just curse my ex sister in law? If you want to.
Whatever's gonna make you feel better. Used to be I would not condone cursing, but whatever. I mean, you do what you got to do.
That's me too. I'm like, to each your own. I'm more of a I will like ward and do all that kind of stuff myself first. And if it gets really out of hand, then I'm like, oh, okay, away
I
with
will do like return to sender. I haven't actually cursed someone, but I reserve the right to curse my father if he makes me.
it's
And
fair.
yeah, I'm out, and all I'll do is give you my 40 years of bullshit you gave me. 40 some. You can have that back.
Just take it and go. Lily Pad's like, you got to do what you got to do. I agree. Exactly what we're saying.
um, Actually, garnet would probably be good for stuff like resentment because it's very closely tied to like the root and sacral chakra, but it does like deal with like aggression and stuff like that. So with reflectors, that's cool.
That is actually a
You mean
really
like,
thought.
yeah, you mean like bicycle reflector kind of deal, Donna? I never really thought about that. I use crystals because I use crystals for basically everything, but crystals and herbs. But that's actually a really cool idea. I mean, it has a similar feel to like a mirror. Anti-resentment stones.
I had always kind of felt that mirrors were portals.
I can see both. I have definitely used them for like reflecting things back, sending things back, or keeping things out because I think for me it depends on your intent because if you're faced with a mirror, it's like you're facing yourself, you're getting back what you're giving in a way. But I can also see as the idea of a mirror being a portal, but I don't know. Some people believe that they're just inherently portals. I personally don't, um, because I haven't had that experience. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if I have mirrors all over my house. If mirrors were just a portal, just to be a portal, there'd be all kind of shit running around in my house. I mean, yes, I have. Like, you know what I mean? I do put up wards and stuff, but I don't know. I think if, from my own personal experience, I feel like I would have to do something to the mirror to make it a portal, if that makes sense, or to
Yeah.
access that ability or
Yeah.
whatever. Broken mirrors. What do you do with broken mirrors? Use them to make wards?
I feel like you definitely could use them for something like that. That's interesting. Especially since
I never really thought about it.
there's that whole superstition with broken mirrors. You know, the whole
Right.
breaking a mirror thing. Like I feel like you could turn that kind of energy around and use it for something profound and powerful. Jim, you got a lot of interesting stuff to say.
Oh, I can see that definitely. Yes, like putting broken mirrors in like witch jars or protection, stuff like that. Because I'll stick like chunks of glass and whatever I can find, and that definitely makes sense. But I mean, I don't just run around breaking mirrors. I don't have any broken mirrors. But the next time, I'm definitely going to keep it because like who knows what I could do with that. It's been a long time since I broke a mirror.
If one just
But
sitting
but
on
yeah,
the
like the whole superstition of it, like you could put that energy back into it and do something with it.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
that's cool.
it's a. I mean, now I have to. I should write that down. Oh well, it'll be on here.
The
You guys,
seer stone. Are you talking about like a hag stone?
I think she's talking about the crystal ball she got for Christmas.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was thinking. But I know I thought she recently shared some stuff about hagstones too.
Yeah, she did. But I think she was saying she wanted one though. But that's why my brain went there, I think, because she had recently. Yeah,
But
I like scrying. Um, Although when I scry, I normally hear things and feel things or even smell things rather than see things. I don't know why. So don't expect that just because you're scrying, you're going to see stuff. It might come up in other ways.
I have not had much luck with scrying.
I haven't.
Fire
No,
scrying, I
she
seem
said.
to have more luck seeing things,
She
but
said no. It's the seer stone from her latest video. I haven't watched. I only let myself watch videos like 1 or 2 days a week, so I haven't caught up yet.
oh girl, I'm so sorry. I'm not caught up on your videos either.
If I would fall into a YouTube hole because I'm subscribed to so many people. Like I would be on there all the time if I let myself. So I have to limit myself.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry,
now
Britt.
I want to go watch it because I want to know what you're talking about.
Right? I know we're awesome, Brittany. Sorry.
Oh well, now I want to know what the seer stone is. I guess I know what I'm doing later.
Right? I've been watching this documentary the last few days, and I'm actually gonna suggest this to anybody who's interested in paranormal, called Hellier. It's basically about this case of that these paranormal investigators look into in a place called Hellier, Kentucky, that involves goblins, and it's kind of
Really?
fascinating. I love paranormal stuff though, so
Yeah, me too. I like all that kind of stuff. Raise his hand. Okay, well, I guess it's about time we should wrap up, even though we were a little late.
yeah.
I definitely discussed everything that I really wanted to, and I don't know. I just felt like, again, everybody goes through grief, every single person, and I know that I could just see that your experience with your spirituality in regards to grief was very different than my own, and I couldn't see a discussion about grief and the process of it and our experiences of it being anything other than healing and helpful whether for ourselves or somebody else in some
Yeah,
way.
exactly. And the whole my being open about my pain is kind of my way of doing that too for other people, to
Mm.
basically say like feel what you need to feel. It's okay to occasion to be like I miss my mom today. This is rough for me. I'm hoping that by my doing that, I'm showing other people that they should do it too. I don't care how long it's been. If you're having a tough day where you miss someone you've lost, say it. It helps give it power that you can feel your emotions and feel what you need to feel aside instead of stifling it.
And I think that's really beautiful. I was so selfish. Like I was just like fuck everybody else. I hurt. Like when I went through mine. So I think that's really beautiful.
Well, we as witches know that words give power to stuff. So,
True. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for putting up with our shenanigans when we were trying to get this going and for coming in and hanging out with us over this time. Um, yeah, I really appreciate it. So, and thank you, Diana, for joining me and for helping me figure it out and get it straight.
of course, I I think this was perfect. Aside from all of the road,
Yeah, the
right?
technical difficulties. Yeah.
Oh, I wanted
Okay,
to
everybody.
documentary is on YouTube that I mentioned, guys. So yeah,
What was it called again?
Hellier.
Hellier.
Yep, Hellier.
Weird. Okay.
And there's 5 parts to it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.